Hello there, folks. It's me, Ferenc on board, game designer and developer in RPG Maker with over 4,000 hours, an RPG Maker whale who spent more than $2,000 on this platform with all sorts of DLCs and, well, things bought from artists from different markets. I still am working on different projects. However, I don't necessarily have a plan to release any project. I'm just constantly challenging myself, even if I have two big projects that I can eventually call games. But I'm more interested in challenging myself rather than coming up with, a finite project. However, I'm interested in sharing some of the insight and wisdom I have acquired. And in this case, it's a situation on how to use variables in a slightly different way, which won't necessarily render you a direct or a big boost in, or let's say a significant reduction in resource usage, but it can help you in a certain way. For example, many people use variables and many people use switches because they are the most important and basic things of RPG Maker. And well, we know switches allow you to trigger certain events, make them appear, have them perform their code, and well, variables are usable in conditionals to again check a certain number of situations, right? In case of using multiple switches, when I need to check things, not to trigger events, I prefer using variables instead. And if you have more events, for example, let's say you have these two events, what people would say would be they would say control variable. Sorry if I'm not fast enough, but I'm using the mouse with my left hand because I've gotten used to this. So if they would need to let's say control different variables through which they test different behaviors or apply certain code to this event, they would say let's pick variable 3, they would give it value number 1 and say okay, or probably give it multiple values. Then the other event, they would go and say okay, this is let's say we shall use variable, let's say number 4, and we will give it the value of 1. Okay, because you can use the scroll mouse button to move through the values. Alright, so now you have two variables for these two events. Now what many people may not know is that you have a finite number of variables, and the more you increase the limit, which is 5,000 by the way, the most you can have, well, the more you increase the limit, the longer your game will take to load, to save, and when you save you have slightly higher chances of getting crashes and losing hours of um, well, accomplishments. It happened to me throughout the years. I've been plagued by this until an idea intuitively came to simply reduce the number of variables that I use. And well, I've been successful in that. This is an older version of the big project, so don't worry too much about it. So what I prefer using, since I generally use hundreds if not thousands of variables and switches, I prefer using compact switches, a system which I called the menu sub-menu system or programming system. This is something that I myself entitled. I'm not sure if people use this necessarily, but well, I'm coding my own things. They code their own way. So here, instead of using two different variables for these events, why not use the same variable? And I will use this variable and I will give this a different value. Why not say 1 comma 1 or 1.1 depending on how your math is functioning. But in this part, you simply cannot use commas or dots. You can only use numbers like this. You cannot use decimals. So what do you do? Well, you technically go to script and say here 1.1, right? Now you go to the other event, and instead of using a different variable, you'll use the same variable as before, which was this one, right? But we go to script and instead we say 2.1. Now what this means is the first number, right, the one before the point, right, before the decimals, represents the event that you will use these variables for. Remember that this is for event checking, conditional checking I mean, and not necessarily to be used for this thing. This kind of sucks to use. I never use this. I only use switches for this. Okay? So the point is, why I do this instead of multiple variables each for each event is because I want less variables used so that I have more space for other events, other situations. So 1.1 means that this represents the first event, right? Event 1, and this represents the situation within event 1. So if you have 6 situations, well, you have 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, 1.6, right? Similarly, you have for the second or third or fourth event, right? You've got 3 situations for event number 4. They will be 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, right? But what do you do when you want to check them? You go to conditionals, and well, if you go to variables, you can't use decimals in here. So you'll need to use a script. In case you don't know the script for variables, well, it is very easy. It's $game variables dot value 3, because we're using variable number 3, okay, equals 1.1. And this is your first situation, right? Now, when you say dot value, in between those braces, or well, actually parentheses, you type the value of the variable, right? The ID without any of the zeros in front of it. So if you have variable 103, let's say, basically it is 0103, but you don't write the 0 before, so you only write 103. What do you do with the other situations? Well, easy. You have uh, here you've got 1.2, right? And obviously 1.3, and how many other situations you might have, right? When you go to the other one, right? What do you do? Well, you have, let's say, 4 situations, right? Now, these will be 2.1, right? I'm using only my left arm for now, because I'm also using my laptop with my right arm, so now this would be situation, right? Event 2, situation 2, and obviously so on and so forth for the others. What you say through here is this is the first situation of the 10 situations I can have. How do I know it's 10? Well, because you can have 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, 2.5 up till 2.9, and let's say 2.0 would mean situation 10. Now think thoroughly before you use this, because if you have 11 situations, well, you could simply use 2.01 instead, right? And this way you have 99 situations that you can handle from 2.01 to 2.99, right? And for situation 9, for example, use 2.09 instead of 2.90, because 0 is always deleted if there is nothing else after, so it would still remain 2.9, right? So when you have situation 9 of the 99 that you can have, well, you have situation 2.09. If you have situation 90, well, you have 2.90 or 2.9. It's going to be the same thing. And situation 100, let's say, would be 2.00, or, well, if you have a 100 situation, then you should start doing things like this, right? And 0.01, which means it is the first situation out of the 999 that you can actually have. So situation 10 would be 0.1, and situation 100 would be 2.1, right? Situation 10 is 0.1, situation 1 would be 001, all right? The same you do for the first one, right? When you debug things and you start your project, if you hit F12, you will find a box where you can actually type things. In that thing you can type, for example, let's say you've got an error and you don't know what value this variable has when the error occurred, so you can simply type game variables dot value 3. That's it, and you hit enter, and it will return the value of the variable, right? The last value that the variable took before the error. And let's say it returns 5.6. What would that mean? Well, it means that the last value was triggered by event 5, right? Or well, it was triggered, but it happened when it was 5, so within event 5, and situation 6, right? 5.6. So this being said, hopefully this allows you to make use of variables in a more complex way. It's not necessarily, you're not obliged to use these variables in this way, but if you want to make use of more and more variables, you simply don't need to increase the limit of the variables, you just need to use them wiser. So this being said, hopefully this was helpful, and don't forget, code wiser and keep it simple. This being said, Ferenc Board signing out, and I'll wait you in the next video.